Webcam microphone up close. Webcam microphone up close.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was a...
See, but I have the files. I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, pistols and fondle slab of choice. I don't know when that was. Doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not just even tourist style. It doesn't matter where the cartoon comes from as long as it's real. It doesn't. It's hard to get real information because seriously, they don't want you to just read these two sources whenever I try to prove out one of these things. It's not a surprise. You expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to sadly disappoint another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty, dirty old man, huh?
Really? Can't be serious. Is this really how you want things to be? Come on. More hooker, eruptions, eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers kind of...
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from FEMA Region 2, within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America. We bring you the Ochelli Effect.
I damn sure know I'm an original.
We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years, for...
That's that.
For a 19-year-old girl to eventually get up to gumption to put these things out.
And that is certainly that. Good evening, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is the Ochelli Effect. I am Chuck Ochelli, as you know, if you already heard the obnoxious bumper. Yes. And it's Thursday night, so, we do things a little different on Thursday night. Usually we have a featured guest, and tonight is no different. Sometimes, though, recently I've been just having Dylan on to discuss general topics, and we go where we go. We attempted to cover that whole thing in Scotland at the time it was happening. That didn't go so well. But, hey, live radio. Tonight, I will do my 2-hour bit, and hopefully... by the way, thanks a lot for tuning in. Everybody who is on the UCY page, of course. Anybody who's listening to us on the alternative streams, because you can, of course, get this on, your Shoutcast, your TuneIn, your iTunes radio. Thank you. I do appreciate every last one of you, even and especially, actually, those of you that can't stand me. But here we go with a regular on my show, who, of course, is somebody that most of you have heard from before, but I'll tell you, every time she comes on, it's something new, something different, because of the incredible volume of stuff she puts out. Suzanne Posel from OccupyCorporatism.com. See, there I go tripping over my tongue on her title, thanks. And, of course, the U.S. Independent. Suzanne, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing amazing. How are you?
Well, it's been a rough week, to be honest with you, but nobody wants to hear about that. It's a rough week, rough month, rough life. What can I say? It is my lot in life to do things in the most interesting and inconvenient way, it seems, but I'm still trying, and I'm still standing, and I'm definitely going to still keep speaking out. There I go again with my tongue. Going to keep speaking out against the idiocracy, the great technocracy, the panopticon that is around us, the strange stories that are in the world. I'm going to keep focusing on all this stuff and try to educate myself and everybody who listens to me right along with that, right along with myself, of course. See, there we go again. I don't know what it is. I just can't even get my tongue out of the way of the rest of my mouth today. All right. Well, we'll keep trying. Now, the first thing that I do want to cover with you, and again, like I said, you can find Suzanne at OccupyCorporatism.com and also the U.S. Independent. That's just .com also, right?
Yes.
Right, usindependent.com. You know what it is? I click on links sometimes and I forget to take note mentally of the web addresses. Usually, and by the way, you can find her all over Facebook, various groups, anonymous, different anonymous truth groups. Scream the News, I think, is one of them. I mean, there are many, many groups out there. You'll see these really great graphics where you can follow the links to the articles as well, in case you're not somebody who surfs the net independently and you just use your Facebook thing to begin your day. You can find Suzanne all over Facebook. And of course, actually, she's also an administrator on the OchelliEffect.com, which means that all of those articles and stuff get posted, not .com, again, the Facebook page for the Ochelli Effect, which has all of your articles come up there as well. That way I don't miss any of them. So, it's not just me reposting them and all that kind of good stuff. There's other administrators there too, but Suzanne's one of the ones on there, and definitely adds all this great news. Now, the first thing I wanted to start with, and if I can just stop stuttering and stammering a little bit, would be this whole thing about these kids who are arguing with their with their school district, right? It seems as though there is this attempt to, again, of course, we all know that history is very controlled, and from the time of the books or whatever it is they're using at this point, because I get different reports about different methodologies for teaching kids in the schools these days. God, I feel old. But, the arguments with history. I mean, I can remember being in history class and being a dissenting voice in history class. What a shocker for everybody out there, right? I was the guy who would sit there and say, well, that doesn't make sense, why did we have to go into the War of 1892? And okay, well, anyway. But meanwhile, you wrote a pretty interesting article about this as well, right?
I did. I was amazed, and I was pleasantly surprised to see these students, these high school students, walk out of the classroom. And this was obviously coordinated. And this was actually the third day of the protest. It finally hit the news. So they had to do this for 3 days. But the reason why they have to do this is because there is a proposal. Now, it hasn't been voted on, and it hasn't been put through. But the fact that it is a proposal was enough for the students to stand up and say, we're not going to accept an attempt to whitewash history by the Jeffco School Board. So the proposal was for Advanced Placement U.S. History, introduced by Julie Williams, who is a member of the Jeffco School Board, to, quote, create a board-appointed community committee which would review district curriculum and make recommendations, including this recommendation for the curriculum Advanced Placement U.S. History. Now, what they want to do is get rid of all dissenters. The curriculum omits Jefferson, Adams, Madison, Franklin, and doesn't even mention Martin Luther King.
Oh, wait a minute. What we're talking about here, and of course I'm aware of this, but just to make sure that the people listening are aware of this, I mean, we are talking about, John Adams, right? I mean, we're talking about the man who succeeded Washington as president of the United States, right? I mean,
exactly. And Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin.
Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, who, regardless of what you may think of them, were absolutely the intellectual engines that drove most of our, a whole lot of the original debate in this country that created what we now consider to be our founding documents and our founding fathers. I mean, these are founding fathers, are they not, Susan?
Well, not only that, but Benjamin Franklin owned a publishing house, and he was in Paris, and he met Thomas Paine, and Thomas Paine was writing pamphlets and pushing for the French Revolution, along with Robespierre and a bunch of other people. And he brought Thomas Paine, published the work called, inspired him, or whatever you want to call it, to write Common Sense, published it for him, and paid for his passage to come to the colonies and push that pamphlet. And that is actually what is considered the spark that started the revolution and the need for the Declaration of Independence.
And meanwhile, I mean, if you're talking about basically redacting these individuals from American history, think about the gigantic holes that get created by it. And what is the reasoning behind this exactly? Just because they were what, rebellious to the English crown? I mean, what are we looking at here?
They're wanting to avoid material on civil disorder and social strife.
So anything that's that is dissidence of any type, basically, from an intellectual standpoint, from a philosophical standpoint, this is something to be avoided, right?
Exactly. They don't want the students to rise up and enact any act of civil disobedience, which is exactly what they did. Go teenagers. You tell them not to do something and they do it.
Well, that's the beautiful thing here, and this kind of made me smile because I'm one of these people who so often says, the youth coming up are very disconnected, and I'm kind of worried because there isn't that rebellious nature. There's this sort of acceptance of everything. There's this sort of lay down or look down anyway at your fondle slab of choice, whatever it might be, and that's of course your iPhones, your tablets, et cetera, and kind of ignore the world around you and sort of accept things. It just seems to be one of these general demeanors among the youth, let's just say, and it's one of the things that I talk about a lot. But the fact is that we're looking at a group of students here that are really doing the right thing and protesting against having their knowledge limited, having their access to information restricted, and this is kind of a hopeful thing in my eyes.
Oh, absolutely. And to reiterate what you were saying, the baby boomers are in their golden years and they're dropping off. And the Generation Xers are moving into positions of power. Will be elected to CEO, presidential level, even congressional on the state and federal level. And so this generation behind the millennials, which is called the Homeland Generation, they are the kids in school right now, and they don't want to be told what to do. They don't want their liberties taken away from them, and they could be the next greatest generation as far as it goes, because every 4 years we have one of those, the greatest generation, who stand up and say, absolutely not, we're not going to take this. So it might take another 20, maybe 30 years for this generation who are in school now to get into positions of power so that we can actually get some changes, because it seems millennials, like you were saying, they love the technology. They just want to be integrated as much as possible. And for the most part, not all Generation Xers, because I'm a Generation Xer, and I'm out here writing articles and talking about this every single day, and dissenting as much as possible. But as a generation, the Generation Xers have kind of set everything out and kind of just been flowing along with the river, whichever way the water seems to be going or flowing down. So it might be that these students here, these kids in junior high and high school right now, that actually might be our hope. So these children are our future. Not to quote Whitney Houston or be cheesy, but they are our future, because these kids are showing us that they don't want any of this control garbage. And if they're willing to organize this was several hundreds of students in 5 Jefferson County schools got together, and some of them were out of the class by 8:30, some of them 9 o'clock, some of them 10:05. 200 students at Pomona High School. At Arvida West, there were 500 students. The students at Lakewood High, they were smart though. Not that the other guys weren't smart, but they went directly to the headquarters of the Jeffco School Board and met with the superintendent to speak to him. And unfortunately, probably being a late term Generation Xer, probably early baby boomer, he made this statement. I respect the right of our students to express their opinions in a peaceful manner. I do, however, prefer that our students stay in class, as I have offered to meet with any student and answer their questions. And he says that they're jumping to conclusions and that the curriculum review panel has not passed, this proposal to change AP US history and that it's not in effect. But that's placating the situation, and that's really talking down to them. They're upset about the fact that this is even a proposal to rewrite history literally with this generation and the generations afterward, where if you don't mention something, it just didn't happen.
Well, and you know what? From a bureaucratic standpoint, they're absolutely correct. They're not jumping the gun at all, because once that proposal is passed, of course, the excuse would be from on high that we have already done this, and if you want to review this for next year or something like that, you can do it there, and they'll sort of pass the buck. So the fact that they're reacting to it while it is still a proposal to try and get it, shut down in its infancy, basically, is the correct MO here. I mean, it's the way to go.
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah, and again, this kind of made me really happy because you do point out that the Generation X, and of course that is my generation. We have, for the most part, not all of us, obviously, because, look, I don't do what I do, based on a need to fit in. As a matter of fact, I've never been one of those kind of people. It's really the more rebellious sort of edges of our generation that are out doing this kind of stuff. But for the most part, we can say that our peers are pretty much, accepting and sort of taking orders and things. I used to attribute it to the idea that we didn't really have a great war to sort of codify ourselves as a group. We didn't have a great struggle. I mean, we had, the tail end of the Vietnam War was far too early on. I mean, although I was, reading newspapers at the age of 3, most of my generation was not. So, they weren't aware that the Vietnam War ended. I mean, we were plenty aware of the fallout when those men came home, but we weren't aware of the ramifications of all this stuff necessarily. And there wasn't a particularly horrible downturn until much later in the Bush years, where we had, a recession that came in, post Reagan era. And it really wasn't even that rough, to be honest. We were sort of like the generation that was angry over just being angry, and and it's strange because there was plenty of things, and I wrote in the 90s in editorials, believe it or not, that I thought that it was really ridiculous that our generation had latched on to certain things. And taken to heart the deaths of celebrities and things to a greater extreme. There was this sort of living vicariously, fairy tale sort of way of being, I would say, that really permeated the entire group there, as it were, my entire subset of society as I saw it. And I found it rather disgusting even back then. And I wasn't even awake or aware, regarding most of this stuff at that time. But I found it kind of like, we were the generation that wasn't challenged, particularly by the rest of the world. I now have a completely different view of that. But I don't think it's entirely invalid to say that. I mean, we had, the AIDS crisis, so to speak, growing up. We had, a few other events, but up until 9/11, we really didn't have that sort of, complete societal shakeup in our lifetimes, I think. And that's one of the things that got missed. I mean, Desert Storm wasn't a war, really. It wasn't something. And I hate to belittle it because, obviously people served and people suffered, and there was plenty of suffering to come. And of course, that's the seeds of what we still see today in the Middle East, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not as though it was earth shattering to us on the home front, let's just say. And it wasn't the long quagmire of Vietnam. It wasn't the sort of unifying force that World War II was. It wasn't even the again, another quagmire, which, thankfully wasn't as long as, as Vietnam or as anything, previous to it was, the war in Korea and things like that. It wasn't one of these events. So, please, we went into Iraq essentially, or I should say the United States went into Iraq, and it was over very, very quickly. There was very little casualties. There wasn't this great fallout. There wasn't, like the belt tightening exercises that we saw in World War II. There was none of this. So you have a different sort of mindset. But like you said, with the millennials coming around and just sort of being accepting, and they're coming of age, but their whole mantra seems to be acceptance, actually. But now they're calling this the Homeland generation.
Yeah, the Homeland Generation. And these are just titles that they give. The gentleman that I'm quoting from, the book is The Fourth Turning, and I think I've talked about this book on your program. Very amazing book. Please go check it out. The gentlemen have combined, written together 4 books, I believe, and done many, many lectures, and you can catch a lot of them on YouTube. And it's really worth listening to because for me, as a parent, it helped wake me up to the understanding of what my role as a parent is for my child, growing up in this world that has been shaped so dramatically in the last 50 years that it in the next by 2024 it will be unrecognizable.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, it's unrecognizable now. When I think back to my childhood, and I say this a lot, that I really would like back the country that I was promised. I would really like back the world that I was told existed around me, but that may never be. I think some of this is irrevocable at this point, but it doesn't mean that we're all doomed. And here's one of those bright spots: is where we have a group of students who have decided to refuse and resist. And I don't want to let it pass by too quickly that also they're removing stuff from modern history, or more modern history, I should say, because after all, the concept of modern history was shaped post Kennedy assassination, because previous to that, historians adhered to the French concept of perspective, which meant that you had to wait at least 75 years in order to honestly give an analytical point of view to any historical event, regardless of what it was. The JFK assassination caused an entire genre of revisionist history and even mainstream historical adherence to certain things, which caused there to be a paradigm shift academically. So at this point, when we're still looking at events like the King assassination, this again is not something that needs to be glossed over or whitewashed. It was a huge event, and the residual effects from that event are tremendous. Not only that, but looking at a study of jurisprudence and the concept of public sentiment and how it drove a lot of the behaviors of the government, of the law enforcement involved, and everything else. This is all, I think, worthwhile to study, if for no other reason but to put it in its proper context historically. And of course, Dr. King alone, whether you agree with the concept of nonviolence, or you agree with the methods that he used, the civil disobedience, etc., these things are all valid and real, situations. And history is history. It does not really mean that that you're supporting what it is that you're studying necessarily, but you may be seeking to understand it so that certain things may not be repeated or otherwise echoed in modern times in another ugly way, so that we don't make the same sort of errors and faux pas, let's just say, as a society, one way or another. And of course, I'm oversimplifying it, but this is pretty major as well.
It is, especially when right now uh, African Americans are 10 times more likely than Caucasian Americans, whites, to enter prison on a drug offense. That means that what Martin Luther King was talking about is it hasn't gone away. We've got affirmative action. We've got the NAACP. We've got 2 mascots, Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, who's finally combed back his hair. Way to go, guy. Uh, the problem is still there. That's what Ferguson is about. That whole town, when you've got 87% of the population in Ferguson African American, and there are only 3 African American gentlemen on the police force in Ferguson, and a Hispanic and a couple of Polynesian gentlemen. The rest of them are white, and you have 96% of the people stopped in Ferguson are African American. Over 50%, I think it's like 53 or 54% of them go to jail.
Oh, right. And I mean, you have no further to look. I mean, you don't even have to look at Ferguson. You can look at the entire prison industrial complex if you like, and you can take a look at, who is actually convicted more often, the rates at which they're convicted, the stiffer sentences delivered. The honesty here is that it has not gone away, that there's a disproportionate selective enforcement of judicial impunity on the African American community, which is significantly higher than any of the other communities in most cases. I mean, there are exceptions. There's areas on the West Coast where you'll find that there are more Hispanics which are convicted at a higher rate and things like this. But overall speaking, for the entirety of our country, still at this point in time, there's a disproportionate amount of punishment laid on African Americans. And I mean, it's not one study, it's not my opinion, it's not your opinion, it's just a fact.
Absolutely. I was watching a film version with Jason Robards and Elijah Wood when he was young, The Adventures of Huck Finn, because my son just got done reading the book. And as we were watching it, it got to the point where the slave, James, said, I need to go to this place downriver to get a boat so I can buy my family, his wife and his children, and bring them to safety. And my son looked at me and said, what is he talking about? Why does he have to buy his wife and children? And so I explained this to him, and he said, that's absolutely stupid. Why would he have to go through that? My son is a Homeland generation child. It's absolutely absurd. He looked at me like, that's absolutely ridiculous. Like I gave him a hamburger made of Jello. How absurd is that? Like I asked him if the number 5 was married. It doesn't make any sense. To him, that doesn't make any sense. That is a wonderful place for these children to be. Because as Whoopi Goldberg said on The View a couple of weeks ago, stop talking about it. Stop engaging in it. Expose it when it is corruption and protest it and get these people. A gentleman was just pulled over at a gas station because he's African American. He was shot for not wearing his seatbelt in South Carolina. This is ridiculous. So if we've got a generation of kids who absolutely understand at a gut level that this kind of thinking is sophomoric and just retarded and stupid, and we need to just stop it, then we need to foster that in these kids now so that by 2024 or 2050, like the UN keeps talking about this great golden age that we're supposed to be having, these children will not see the divisions and the differences that we have, and hopefully they will be able to overcome them so that we don't have to have affirmative action and we don't have to have the NAACP. We don't have to have any advocacy groups because everyone is each other's advocate. We don't care what your color is or what your gender is. We care about whether or not you're capable of doing what you say you're going to do, or if you're a mechanic, capable of doing what your job, that is more important, that you're contributing than what you look like or what the color of your skin is as a definition of your intelligence level. There was a study that was put out in the 80s talking about how African American boys, as juxtaposed with white boys of the same age in K through 5, K through the end of elementary school, that they found that African American boys were less able to understand the curriculum and therefore at an intellectual disadvantage because of a genetic predisposition to not being able to understand information. That is absolutely ridiculous.
No, what is more likely here is that depending on where the sampling was done, If you're looking at a large African American population, you'll find that the educational system which is available to them is quite quite far behind the ones that are in the primarily white neighborhoods. I mean, this has nothing to do with see, this all goes back to the whole concept of genetics being the determining factor to begin with. There is what they call an epigenetic response to anything, regardless of what you start out with. If you don't flip the right switches, the bad things don't necessarily come out. That's the way it goes. And I know I'm oversimplifying again, but this is absolutely ridiculous. There's not a causality here related directly to the individuals that they were studying. There's probably a causality due to their environment, due to what they're exposed to. This is, the whole like nature versus nurture argument is ridiculous because both of them are responsible for what forms the human being. And this is something that I've got to say that at the very least, and I do refer to us as the lazy generation, okay? The lazy generation at least had the sense to kind of pass on. See, all right, this is going to sound a little odd, but I know for a fact that, that my oldest child doesn't have these types of viewpoints. She doesn't subdivide people. I think she takes it a little too far in some cases and excuses actions sometimes, but regardless of that, she doesn't make these like discernments between individuals as groups. It's not one of these things that's even part of her thinking. It wasn't there because it was never presented to her. And this is, I think, something that we kind of took on as, I don't want to say as like a politically correct thing because I'm not for political correctness in any way, but there was a more humanistic aspect that sort of evolved, I would say, during our generation that we were able to pass on, and I think these kids are starting to redefine the lines a little bit. And one good thing, again, like you said, is that this post-millennial generation is willing to stand up and question things, which, thankfully, because the generations that preceded us didn't want to question authority in any way, shape, or form, except those, few radicals out there. And even amongst ourselves, it took the most rebellious of us to question anything. I would like to see that become more the norm as opposed to the rebellious subset, And again, pat on the back to those kids because this is exactly what you do. You stand up and you say something, when something is not right. And to have your ability to grow intellectually, to have the information restricted so that there is less discussion because why? This may be dangerous in some way or other. There is no dangerous thought. There's plenty of dangerous action. And, to debate things and to work things through and to discuss them in general, I think should be encouraged. And, I don't think there is any harm in doing this, because, again, it is the content of someone's action, which defines them. And after giving careful consideration to things and maybe even considering the opposition, considering why it is someone is resistant to a particular program, as it were, why someone is resistant to a particular type of legislation or social norm. You may find yourself reconsidering your own positions and maybe even adjusting them to a more realistic state. And this is something that I think is entirely valuable. And again, it's just one of those hopeful things I'm so glad to see.
I am too. Because I understand that things take time. The ideology that changed the 60s into the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and now, this takes time. It takes time to change the way that we think. Do you hear some background noise?
Well, I muted out. I didn't hear any, but Who knows? Maybe we're saying something we shouldn't.
Oh, it sounds like commercials.
You must have something running because I'm just hearing like a very little bit of hum.
Oh, this
It's
is weird. I'm sorry, folks. It's gone away now.
no problem. You know what? You might have had something open on your browser. This happened to me the other day. I was on the air doing a show, and all of a sudden I started hearing a KFC commercial, and I have no idea why. I still don't know exactly where it came from, but when I shut down, everything else I had open besides the Skype, it went away. So
No, I just have on my browser just my website and a few articles that you had said you wanted to cover with me, but I'm glad that it's gone because I was tripping me up. Um,
it's awfully
but
distracting.
the
Yes.
flip side of the millennial generation is anonymous. And this open source movement and the people who use the Tor browser and Mozilla, sorry, and anonymous browsing. The open source generation who are writing code and teaching themselves how to write code and program and build computers. The flip side of that is this whole other half of the millennial generation is now pushing the next generation of their underlings to be the people who will control what happens because as we move into more technology and more dependence on technology, these people who write the code and the software and the programmers, these people are going to be in control over whether or not this system functions properly on any end of that spectrum at all. And
Right.
yeah, you can buy off some people, but you can't buy off all of them. And we have an entire generation who have taught themselves and are continuing and writing new code themselves and building websites and building better websites and platforms and better platforms and social media platforms. And they are able to do without any formal training the wondrous things that anyone who works at Google or Intel or Microsoft could do. And they've spent years in school learning this.
Well, it would certainly be nice to see the specialized world of programmers sort of overwhelmed with citizen individuals who can do the same thing. That would be awfully great. Of course, I think I'll have shuffled off of this little mortal coil by the time all that comes to fruition. But you know,
Well, in about 2024, 2025, we'll start to see some real effects of the ideological shift that's happening between Generation X, Millennial, and the Homeland generation. And I think I'm going to be in my 60s at that time, so you'll be around.
well, we shall see. We never know what the next day will hold, but yeah, it's a possibility, I suppose. Um, I know that I wanted to focus on this because I just think it's so good to hear. And I know it's probably like, Chuck, why do you give it crap and all that? Well, because I was usually the lone dissenter when it came to stuff like this. When it came to, well, why don't we explore this subject? Why aren't we going into this or that or the third thing? I mean, not to go into the Kennedy thing, but I mean, even during Black History Month, in my school, which was a new phenomenon. Did you experience that when you were coming up too?
Looking back, I think it's funny because as I get older, I'm 37, and for some reason, since I turned 37, I've been extremely nostalgic about my childhood and movies from my youth. And I'm looking back at the books that I read in high school and the people I was exposed to. I thought Bill Hicks was awesome. I used to listen to him. My mother didn't like him very much. I used to listen to him and watch his programs on HBO, and my father listened to George Carlin. So I listened to George Carlin, and then so Bill Hicks was just awesome because he was my George Carlin. And Nirvana. I went to one of the last concerts that they performed in Bayside, Florida, before Kurt Cobain killed himself or was murdered or whatever.
Mhm.
And so these things that affected me and the books that I read, Clockwork Orange was one of my favorite books. And when I saw the movie, I was so impressed with the way that Stanley Kubrick adapted the book to film because that is exactly what I saw in my head when I was reading it. It was amazing to me. And so these things shaped my life. So of course I ended up doing what I'm doing because look at what I was listening to. Look at what I was exposed to. Look at what I was reading and the movies that I was watching. I was destined to do this, to dissent, because throughout all of my formidable years, I have always sought out the idea that there needs to be an understanding of what's actually happening as opposed to what we think might be happening or what could possibly happen in the future.
Mm.
You know, predictive models are ridiculous because you can put in any data. I mean, Michael Mann proved that with ClimateGate. You can just put in whatever you want and create a hockey stick if you want to, and then give it to Al Gore, and he writes a whole movie about it, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
But this idea that we have to question everything, I mean, I sort of gravitated toward that. And what's funny is maybe it was my mother, but my mother was a bra-burning feminist, and she was very into Gloria Steinem, who I find very shocking. Way too no, like Margaret Sanger. My first introduction to Margaret Sanger was alongside Gloria Steinem, and immediately I said, "Oh no, no, this is not an ideal for a woman. No, I would rather have the Marilyn Monroe idea, or even Joan Crawford, as horrible as she was to her kids, than
Right.
these other women, because the feminist movement, when it got to my generation, completely destroyed me. I was never going to, in a conventional way, achieve my full potential just because of my gender.
See, and that was part of the problem I had with it growing up at that time because it was obviously, it was post the 60s. Okay. I was born in the 70s also, and it just it it became like too much of a mind game because it was like too far. It was like too far. I mean, look, to to be treated as an equal is one thing, but it seemed to me as though growing up at that time, it was almost like I'm an equal plus, and it just was like too strange of a shift. You know what I mean? It was sort of like, you know, you, being a male at that time, you didn't know what was going to happen if you dared to do something, which was generally thought of as polite a generation before, right? The guy who opens the door, he might get a thank you, but then again, he might get hit upside his head and told, I can open a damn door myself. You never knew what you were getting because there was kind of a confusion that had built up at that time. And the whole Steinem thing, and of course, Sanger's come up recently because of, Hillary, who I'm not a fan of, having mentioned that, this was one of her inspirations, right? Uh, and Steinem, there's plenty of issues to be had there, and there's all kinds of different discussions we could have about that. But I mean, feminism kind of went off the rails, I think, during our generation, in fact.
Well, I found this little interesting tidbit of information. Wonder Woman was created in 1941 by a gentleman named William Marston, a psychologist from Harvard University. And in a press release, Marston said Wonder Woman was conceived, I'm sorry, a press release from Harvard University. Wonder Woman was conceived by Dr. Marston to set up a standard among children and young people of a strong, free, courageous womanhood to combat the idea that women are inferior to men and to inspire girls to self-confidence and achievement in athletics, occupations, and professions monopolized by men, because the only hope for civilization is the greater freedom, development, and equality of women in all fields of human activity. And Marston said himself, frankly, Wonder Woman is a psychological propaganda for a new type of woman who should, I believe, rule the world. That is why when feminism got to my generation, I was basically screwed. Still, to this day, women make 83 cents on the dollar, even if they have the same amount of education, the same amount of skill, and the same amount of production as a man. Even in this industry, it became very apparent to me in the beginning that I was a novelty because I have such a strong presence and I'm a woman. And women in this industry are, in media in general, are chosen based on their looks and their ability to read a script. But in alternative media, it's a rarity that an intellectual woman comes forth. And unfortunately, not enough of us are given the opportunity to even speak, even in alternative media. When I was a little girl, Linda Carter was the bomb, okay? I used to run around in my little Wonder Woman outfit the whole time the show was on. I thought she was amazing. I wanted to be Wonder Woman for years. I was very upset at my mother told me that there was no way that could happen, and I really got genuinely upset. But that idea, that psychological propaganda of this woman was placed there since 1941 and then revised and given new life in time for me to watch the reruns and the later episodes. So my mother and me, the two generations, ended up really sucking in the majority of this psychological propaganda, this idea, in order to give women the impression that we can rule the world. There has to be a synergetic relationship between men and women. And women are good at certain things and men are good at certain things, and we're both good at some things, or the majority of things we're both good at. But where we excel, we need to hold up strong the other half, and vice versa. Because when you look at children who were raised by a single parent, whether it's the father or the mother, they are kind of off balance. It's kind of like those commercials. Did they have their V8? They're a little bit askew. And children who are raised by both parents have a broader, more secure self-confidence about them. And that is not to say that single parents don't do a good job, because I was raised by a single parent and my mother did a fabulous job with me. Look at me. But there are areas in my personal life where over the years I've noticed that I'm a little bit askew, and it does bleed into professional life. And the fact that I'm in a marriage, a happy marriage, and we both raise our children together, that has alleviated a lot of the other issues, because there is security and there is stability, and I don't have to be afraid. But we've got a Generation X who are raising children who didn't have both the male and the female influence at the same time when they needed them the most, which was their beginning of their formidable years. And part of that was the planting of Wonder Woman and these ideas that you and I were just discussing, that women are equal to men. We're not equal to men. We're better at you at some things, and you're better at other things than us. And where we meet in the middle is where we're equal, but it's not a totality. And to diminish that means that both genders are not being served, and we're hurting as a society.
And I can't argue with a single thing you just said, Suzanne. Here's the thing. You're dead on. This is exactly what I've said, even before I was aware and awake and all that. It's exactly the same thing. I believed it because there is a balance which can only come. Look, there are certain areas where I would say, generally speaking, and not always, but generally speaking, you're better off putting a woman in certain places. You just are. There are other places where, I'm sorry, in my opinion, you're better off putting a man. There are just certain, in general, it doesn't mean that every man would be better than every woman in that situation. People often bring up the whole thing about firemen and policemen and things like this. I think I'd feel a little better sometimes with somebody who's a little more even-tempered regarding certain situations when it comes to police officers, if there were more women police officers for certain situations, to be honest with you. Because there's less of that that sort of false male programming that requires one to have to assert themselves, which is another weird sort of thing that goes on with with men. Men and women do it in different ways, I think. But men seem to leap to violence a little quicker in some of these cases. And that's my observation, my opinion. I'm not going on any sort of study here. This is just what I see. When there's a frustrating situation and you have to negotiate with somebody, you might be better off with a woman. But then again, when it comes to other things, there are all sorts of. Okay, I have the newborn, right? I have. I mean, I love him to death, and I do everything I can, and I do all the same stuff. And I'm not saying that Kim needs to do things more than me with him or anything else, but there are just certain things that she pulls off a lot better with the baby than I do. When when they get to be toddlers and things, I have a better time, and I can talk to them and things like that. It's easier for me to verbalize, but I don't take the same cues that she does. I mean, I look at this child and I'm sitting there and I think I've done everything already, and he's still crying or throwing a fit, and I don't know why. And she solves it really quickly. It's like an instinctive thing, and I've noticed that women are better at that kind of thing as well. Also, seems as though when you have to organize certain things, women are better at that as well. uh, yeah, and
Yes, but then you complain that you can't find anything. So,
of course, of course I do, and I knew that joke was coming. And at the same time, I mean, even the first show I did on this network, I had on Joan Mellon, who is an excellent author and professor at Temple University, all that kind of stuff. She's an academic, and we discussed Jim Garrison. But that aside, she had said that that she had felt and made it a point that night to say that she had felt that she was sort of marginalized as a researcher, as an author, as a biographer in a lot of cases, because it just seemed as though it was more acceptable for a man to do this kind of work. And I know that's not the same as being a journalist, but I find it remarkable that I hear this over and over again that women who are being communicators on a mass scale, that are trying to get out their thoughts, their views, trying to show us news or history in any way, shape, or form, often do feel as though they're not being taken as seriously as their male counterparts.
oh yeah, I saw that professionally. Uh, it was amazing to me because I went to school to be a paralegal, and that's a attorney's offices. Those are a male-dominated field, and the paralegals, who are usually female, are very peckish, like chickens. And so, working in law offices, I saw this crazy dynamic going on, and it was very, very shocking to me to be exposed to that. But I chose to stay home and raise my children, even though that went against everything my mother taught me to do, because I realized that when you have a child, whatever you wanted to do. Look, folks, I wanted to travel the world. I always wanted to be married, but I wasn't sure if I really wanted kids, and I wanted to climb Machu Picchu. That's my dream. To sit at the top of Machu Picchu. I probably am not getting there now that I have two children, because now that I have these children, my job is to put that aside and make sure that they have what they need emotionally, physically, mentally, and any way possible. And as a parent, if I don't take that responsibility in every way, shape, or form as a woman, there's something wrong with me. And I know that that might offend some people, and I'm sorry, but there really is something wrong with you. If you can't put what you have always dreamed about aside for another human being that didn't choose to be on this planet, you chose to bring them here. And so your responsibility to them for the first 20 years is to make sure that they have the best opportunities possible so that can become the best version of themselves that they could imagine for themselves. And anything less is uncivilized. And so men and women do this differently. And we excel when we are able to do this the way that we naturally do it. And when we're told how to do things and have to go to classes and have to listen to this intellectual psychobabble about what's right and what's not, we go against our instinct and what is natural. And we're seeing evidence of that in our inability, like you were saying. I was one of those girls who liked chivalry, and I never got it because the boys that I dated were more confused than their fathers, who dated their mothers in the 60s and got married and realized that these women burned their bras and they paid for their half of the dinner, so they didn't need to be treated like that. But I wanted to be treated like that,
Well,
and I
but
never
see,
got that.
but you got to appreciate that from and I'm speaking probably for these guys you dated, okay? Uh, but here's the problem. Uh, Again, you don't know what you're going to get when you do that. So even if your natural instinct was to, pull out the chair, or open the door, or whatever else, uh, you didn't know if you were going to get, the angry sort of backlash from what you just did. It was like it was unbelievable to try and like negotiate through this because, you could deal with two different girls in the same town who seemed to be, virtually on paper, let's just say, almost identical. And you never knew what they were sort of infused with at home. Was this a big offense to open a door for them? Because that what, yeah, I can't open a door for myself. I can't do that I can do everything myself. You didn't know if you were going to get that or if you were going to get, well, thank you. You know, or even in other odd cases, I'll open the door. You know, you never knew. And it was like it was like I don't know how to put it. It was like a roll of the dice. You never knew exactly how it was going to land. And so I'd have to say that a lot of these guys probably took no action, trying to blend in as best they could until they could figure it out. Suzanne.
It's terrible because my husband and I have a very traditional relationship, and at night when the kids are being rambunctious, I quiet them down better than he does. So I go up there. I hate it. I hate being the only one to do that. Sometimes we have to pause the movie 5 or 6 times, and it's really annoying to keep walking up the stairs every 5 minutes. But I'm better at it than he is. So I'm the one responsible for that. But in the same respect, because we have a traditional relationship, he's responsible for bringing in enough money to support the family. And he takes on that responsibility and does a wonderful job doing it. But that is his sole responsibility. I mean, the money that I make off my website pays for the website to be up and the US Independent to be up. Um, but there's no profit to be made there. So my husband is taking care of us and fulfilling that role in a very strange way. See, there's a millennial take to this because my husband works from home. He's a graphic arts designer, and he also builds websites and does consulting and social media consulting. And he has a couple of regular clients, and then he does some off stuff. He built Jack Blood's new website that's coming out. He built that.
Ah, well,
He's done some work for Gary Franchi over at Next News Network, and he does most of his work from home. So he sits up in the office upstairs, and the children know that he's here, but we're downstairs and we have to pretend that daddy isn't here. Even though I send my son upstairs to go tell daddy that it's time for lunch.
well, right, but but and probably you'll get a little criticism from some people still, who will tell you that well, this isn't right because you should be more this and you should be more that. But who is anybody else to judge if you have something that works? And not only that, but something that I would note is I do know, and I don't know your husband really, but I do know that he's supportive of what you do. And I know that you're supportive of what he does. So, here's the thing. If you have two people that are willing to support one another and stand together and work together to do everything, regardless of whether that's, raising the kids or taking care of finances or whatever else, however it is you guys have figured it out, if everybody's comfortable and happy in their particular roles, what does that matter, right? I mean,
Yes,
I
because my son is learning how to be his father's version of a man, as a provider, as a father, and as a husband through my husband's actions, and vice versa to me to my son, and then to him to my daughter, and me to my daughter. They're getting a well-rounded understanding of what it's like to be in a relationship that is beneficial not only to each other, but also we're very good friends. And that makes a big difference. I used to get mad at my mother when she said relationships are based on friendship. What are you talking about? Because I have all these wonderful flowery feelings. No, those go away. And what are you talking about? Then that's the end of the relationship. No, that's just in Romeo and Juliet. No, the relationship is supposed to go on. That's just at the end of the Disney film. Happily ever after actually exists, and you have to figure out how to do that every single day. And I didn't understand because I didn't have my father there to how that relationship is supposed to look. So what did I do? I looked at television, I looked at movies, I looked at my favorite actors and watched them get married and divorced and said, "Oh, gee, that's what you do. You just bounce around and you do things until they don't feel good and then you stop and then you go do something else."
And therein lies why you said you were a bit askew. If you were taking the stuff that you were watching on TV and in the media growing up and utilizing that, you know,
Oh, exactly. All of us were. We
yeah,
were all doing it. And the problem is that now that we have children, we realize that that lifestyle, that ideology just doesn't work at all, especially when you have a child. You have to have stability, you have to have purpose, and you have to have drive in order to achieve that. Otherwise, this person who's completely dependent on you is going to fail. To the extent that they might be taken away from you or they might perish because of your actions. And I don't think that we think about that enough in this generation that our parents getting divorced um, did a disservice to us, and we are playing that action out, that emotional tearing that happened to us in our childhood. We're playing that out in our 20s, late 20s or 30s, and maybe early 40s. But if we understand what the problem is, we don't have to make our children, the next generation, the continuing victim. It's like alcoholism in the family. At some point, someone has to stop drinking. And that person who stops drinking won't have children who drink. And then that their grandchildren won't drink and their great grandchildren won't drink, but somebody's got to stop drinking. And I think that uh, the Generation Xers might be at that stage where they realize somebody's got to stop destroying the nuclear family because otherwise we'll never have a family ever. And then they
right.
might as well be making us an incubators because it won't matter.
And you know, from a psychoanalytical standpoint, which I took a great deal of time to study, but don't often reach back into that little plethora of knowledge. But let's be honest, they have some good points regarding what they call breaking cycles. And this is exactly what you're talking about here. Of course, you've just pretty much explained every mistake I've ever made in my life. Thank you. But but yeah, it seems to lead to that. I mean, you teach your children through your actions, you teach your children through your relationships, and you teach them every single day based on your behaviors. And they will be the ones that wind up running this mess if there's anything left of it by the time they get old enough. You know, and they're going to run it based on what they learned very early on. I've always said that, and I've always felt that. You know, and some of us do have to rebel against those cycles, and some of us will have better foundations for behavior, and this is definitely all valid. And of course, we totally skipped over dealing with your articles. I do want to get back to those, but this is just a fascinating discussion, in my opinion. So,
No, I love talking about stuff other than my articles. Tomorrow, I'm going to be on Mark Snyder's Exopolitics on Blog Talk, and we're going to be discussing spiritualism and uh, universal consciousness. And I never get to talk about that kind of stuff. So I'm excited when I get to talk about something other than my articles. So.
Oh, well, okay. But, you know, that's been like my focus lately is universal consciousness. I've been discussing it with various people and getting different viewpoints. Even at one point bringing on the guy from the Church of Satan, which which gave me a different viewpoint, let's just say, because you know, his whole thing was that you know, there is no God and and there is no great consciousness and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, you know, positive visualization is real, which I found kind of contradictory, but interesting at the same time that that guy even said it. And then, of course, you know, wound up having on a couple other people to discuss exactly the same kind of thing, you know, regarding the the aggregate force of one's prayers, one's intentions, things like that, and definitely a fascinating topic. And yeah, it does fall a little outside of your articles, though.
I don't touch religion at all. It's such a touchy subject that I don't write about it from either standpoint. If something happens in the news that is noteworthy, that has a religious bent, I stay neutral because it can make or break completely. Ideology and personal belief is paramount to us psychologically, and so to in any way isolate or make someone feel like they are what they believe is less than what they should be believing, or stupid or ignorant for believing that, just completely whitewashes any of the information of the core of the story. So I stay away from it. I just skirt the Switzerland-like fence of religion.
Probably makes you a much wiser person than myself. But um, because I engage in this stuff because I find it fascinating, especially when when somebody tells me that they've discovered the universal truth. I just sort of feel as though human beings are too limited to fully appreciate the universal truth. But I do look at all the different aspects of it, and I let people speak their minds about it because every time I do, I learn something new, and that's sort of what this is about. When I do my show, is I try to expose people to different things and expose myself to different things to give myself at least a different perspective, so that I can more better, nice. I can, I'm telling you, it's one of these days I just don't have the English language at my command, Suzanne. Ah, okay.
No,
Well,
but I totally understand what you're saying. I don't think that we know. I think that we like to leapfrog. The idea of intelligent design. Okay, so something intelligent created this. And then all of a sudden, everybody leapfrogs over to God or Allah or Yahweh or whatever their God is. That's the intelligent designer. No, we didn't say that. We said there is evidence of something intelligent, that this was purposefully done, and that would, by definition, mean that something of intelligence created this. But we don't know what that intelligence didn't leave its signature at the bottom of the painting. So we don't know what that is. And I've studied religion since I was 12, all the major religions and religions of the ancient world that are not practiced, and including pseudo religions and Satanism. And what I found universal in all of these is a desire to alter who you are naturally, to suppress in some way, or to heighten um, a lacking of empathy as the ultimate in a lot of different forms.
mm,
And that this has to change, that you have to become this other thing, whether this entity that's lacking empathy, or this you just have to keep repenting every Sunday so you can say your Hail Marys, whatever, in the confessional at in Catholic churches, and have a personal relationship where it's okay it's to talk to yourself all the time. Where and I didn't mean that in a broad sense, folks, and I apologize to anybody that I offended. But most of this is geared toward getting away from who you really are and understanding who you really are, to be a better version of yourself, or to be the best version of yourself that you could muster. And religion does a great job of taking that away from us, so that we're always attaining something and we're always moving towards something that we'll never attain. And the other aspect that I notice in all religions across the board, uh, modern religions, religions that are old, and religions that are no longer practiced,
mhm,
is this idea that you kind of like what we do with our kids. where we tell them you're going to do this or you're going to get punished. And so there is that back door where for those people who need a little bit more, if you don't do this, you're going to get punished. You're going to get put in timeout. You're going to get sent to hell. You're going to have to come back to this earth and be reborn and be reincarnated. And it again takes away from the purpose of us trying to be the best version of ourselves that we can possibly be and have a really good life and enjoy ourselves. And so, to me, those two aspects of all the religions that I've studied um, leads me to believe that this is a control mechanism.
Yeah, I find it funny because I knew you were going to that very same conclusion because that's where I ended up, in the same way. And yeah, I took the time to study, most of the mainstream religions as well, and then of course deviated into well, what came before it, what was before. I mean, even going so far as to study, certain things that were localized and only in particular areas, especially tracing back my own ethnic roots and things. Finding out what actually was the religion of the Roman Empire prior to it becoming Christian Empire, etc., which was a sham anyway. And the whole concept of control just seemed to be reoccurring for me. And this, along with, like you said, and this is one of the things that I do make a statement about all the time, is the lack of empathy among individuals causes so much harm. If you don't understand, if you don't take the time to, and this is different than sympathy, by the way. Sympathy and empathy are not the same thing. You can sympathize with someone, but it does not mean that you actually feel what they feel. To actually empathize with another individual is to sort of put yourself in their shoes. And gee, wouldn't the world be a lot better if that's something that you had to do, if that's something that you naturally did, and I think that that's something that sort of came along with with the starter set when you were a human being. You were able to empathize with others. You were able to, there are cases, obviously. I mean, there are sociopaths which do not, but usually there's some damage for that. What I'm saying is that, generally speaking, it is part of the natural human condition to empathize with your fellow creatures. There are people that, empathize a great deal with animals, but seem to have no relationships with people. It doesn't necessarily follow that removing empathy from the equation is a good thing. And I notice that quite often, because there's all these lines always drawn, usually there's like an us and them mentality eventually. When you get all the way through the dogmatic belief systems, you'll find that there's an us and them. And the them, it doesn't matter what happens to them because they need to go to hell anyway, and they need to go to Valhalla, and they need to go to, wherever else, and they're going to be put away, and you're going to be rewarded. And this, in a sense, is kind of like a false construct, because what happens is that, if you're only focused on that and you're only focused on preparation for the afterlife and everything else, what are you going to do while you're living? It's one of those things that just continuously flips back and forth as a contradiction in my mind. So, and that's what I discovered, again, probably starting at about the same age as you did, going through all this stuff. So I find that remarkably interesting that you and I came to the same conclusion, because up until, this year, you and I didn't really even know each other. So it's kind of funny.
The straw that broke the camel's back was a couple of years ago, my husband and I watched the movie The Secret. And
oh boy.
Yeah. and totally, dude, that is one of the most brilliant marketing schemes ever. In fact, the salesmen marketers are part of it. They're in the movie pitching sales to you and you don't even realize it, okay? But the idea behind it, because I've always been a scientist at heart, I went and looked for understanding what is going on physiologically in the brain that is creating, like you were saying, about positive feelings. And one of the situations in the film was you stub your toe in the morning and then all of a sudden your whole day goes, down the toilet. And there's a actual physiological explanation for that that has nothing to do with spirituality.
Hmm.
It's because when we stop releasing the dopamine into our and reintroduce the stress hormone, cortisol. Thank you.
Right.
Once you stub your toe, you start to release cortisol. Cortisol has an addictive quality to it. And so the more you're stressed out, the more stressed out you will be. And we behave differently toward our loved ones, toward complete strangers, toward our coworkers, toward our friends when we are under the influence of cortisol than when we are under the influence of dopamine. So there is a logical explanation for that, that when we allow ourselves to re-release dopamine back into our brain, even when cortisol's been introduced, by thinking positively, by maybe taking a couple of deep breaths. My daughter likes to tantrum. She's turning 4, and her terrible twos are lasting for 2 years. Oh my God. And so we're teaching her to count backwards from 5 to 1. It's not working, but I really hope that it might. But I realize it's insane for me to say that because I know it's not working. But the idea behind it is what I'm discussing. When we calm ourselves down and reintroduce the dopamine, the effects of the cortisol become less and less. The more dopamine, the less cortisol, the dopamine takes over. You have a pleasant day. Then the stub toe is not an issue. Then the traffic jam that caused you to be late is not an issue. And there's a physiological explanation for that. But the problem is when we don't understand what's actually happening, we come up with these wild cockamamie explanations for them. When we don't understand that the back door is open, we think there's a ghost in the house. When we don't understand that children have night terrors and this is normal as their brains are changing and the chemical makeup of their brains change. They go through bouts of high cortisol influx and then high dopamine influx. When we don't understand the effects of aspartame. Just last night, I was putting the kids to bed. It was about an hour before bed, and my daughter wanted an apple, and I ran out of apples. So I gave her some yogurt. And I did not check the label very well on that yogurt, and it had aspartame in it. And let me tell you, folks, within 20 minutes, my daughter was jumping up and down, and she was all sparkly. And that's when I realized, okay, what was in that yogurt? Aspartame. If I didn't understand that aspartame is causing her to all of a sudden jump up and down and run around the house and be very jittery and sparkly, I would say that she needs Ritalin. I would say that she was demon possessed. I would say that there's a ghost in the house and they're using her body or whatever other explanation that I would come up with. But understanding the effects of aspartame on the brain, I knew that she was just having this jolt of aspartame, and it lasted about an hour. That's how little chemical exposure my children have, by the way, folks, that her aspartame sparkly moment lasted about 60 minutes, and I timed it. And it was amazing to me to, once I recognized that she was sparkly, to watch her go through this. And I thought about this, what I'm telling you right now, that if I didn't know what was actually happening, I might come up with some cockamamie excuse to justify her behavior and then treat her differently at the same time the next night in anticipation that this might happen again, not knowing that if I don't reintroduce the aspartame, it's not going to happen.
Right. And but even that said, the idea though that there is not something to the concept of positive visualization. Obviously, like you said, there's a cause and effect regarding the physiological changes. You'll have a different demeanor, you'll have a different attitude, and that causes your interactions to go differently. So therefore, utilizing the ideas of positive visualization are not, completely to be discounted, because after all, if you change your sort of thought process, you'll change what your brain does, you'll change what your body does, et cetera, right? I mean, so all of these things are, entirely part of the equation, but not necessarily the same part that a lot of people see it as.
Well, the interesting thing is these are examples or tools or exercises to get the result. So the result is you want the dopamine reintroduced into your brain. You want the cortisol to be removed and you want the dopamine to take over. Now, how do we do that in the real world? Because we're not, in our brain telling our brain, okay, shut off the valve for cortisol and turn and open the valve for dopamine. We do it by these tools and these exercises, by meditating, by thinking happy thoughts, by doing something, turning on loud music that you really like and dancing around and being silly for a moment, watching a funny movie or an episode of a AFV or something. It's something to make you feel good so that you reintroduce that. These methods and tools that we use are absolutely imperative because without them, we have a difficult time reintroducing the dopamine. But I think sometimes people get wrapped up in the tool and not understanding what's actually happening. That the tool is just a way to get to from point A to point B being more dopamine, less cortisol. That we lose the point of the entire situation. I think that's where the example I used with intelligent design, we lose the point. The point is now that we know that this is intelligently designed, then we have this wonderful opportunity to figure out who that is and where they are and can they do it again and have they? We're so wrapped up in labeling who the intelligent designer is that we miss the point. And we're so wrapped up in our rituals of meditation and crystal rubbing and wearing chakra jewelry that we miss the point. And I think that's the tragedy when it comes to things like religion and pseudo-religions, that we've completely missed the point. And therefore, the effects of them don't last as long as they should because we don't understand what we're actually doing. We're using a car to get from our house to the grocery store. The purpose of the trip is not to drive the car. The purpose of the trip is to get to the grocery store so you can buy your groceries and bring them home. The car just happens to be the way in which you're doing it. You could be taking a bus, you could be riding a bike, you could be carpooling, you could have called a taxi. You chose to drive a car. So when we get stuck on the car, we miss the point of the purpose, and the purpose is the groceries. And again, I think that's where we are when it comes to religion, when it comes to The Secret and all these things that have popped up since it and before it, that we focus on the tool, the apparatus, because that's where the money is, by the way, folks. That's where the money is.
See, to me, it's more like the totality of the experience is something that is all valid. In other words, it's not simply just just the end result, but the entire thing is an experience in and of itself. And if you take it that way, it's a little different. It's not getting wrapped up in the tools of the trade. It's not getting wrapped up in the end result. It's just sort of taking it all in. You know what I mean? This is how I view it anyway.
No, that's wonderful because that's the it's the journey, not the destination. And think about it. Every day is completely different. I'm having these talks with my son because he's turning 8 and he's starting to become aware of time and how long things take. Like, when is my birthday, Mom? How long is it till my birthday? And because he's becoming aware of this, he's aware of a new sense of his surroundings and his environment. And it's a very interesting time. And it's like what you said. It's the journey, not the destination. For him, at this point in his life, he's realizing that there is a destination. So he's combating whether or not he still wants to enjoy the journey or whether he needs to focus on the destination. And I think we all ask that question periodically throughout our life. Maybe that's what midlife crises are about and subsequent crises are about.
I like how you added in subsequent crises because a lot of people end the discussion at midlife crisis, and let me tell you, there's plenty of subsequent ones to go along with it. And this is this is the way these things work. This is obviously, again, way off from your usual discussion with the articles, but I'm really glad that we're doing this because it gives us a different insight, and also don't forget, everybody, that yeah, you can find a lot of the stuff that Suzanne writes about. Not this exactly, but a lot of the stuff that Suzanne writes about at OccupyCorporatism.com and the USIndependent.com. And I would say that that the information there is something else. But this way, you're getting an insight into the person who is writing all this stuff, because you do put out an amazing array of articles, by the way, and it's rather constant in my opinion. So it's just one of those things that's like you're very consistent, very constant with this information, and it's not all about the facts and figures, is it? I mean, there's a whole lot more that goes into your motivation to do this, right?
Oh, absolutely. But I am stuck on evidence, and that makes some people upset. And when I sort of let the audience know that certain information is not credible and how it isn't, and here's the links to prove what I'm saying, I find it a public service that part of my journalism is to the totality of my journalism is to expose corruption, but part of it is to expose all corruption. And no corruption is taboo. No corruption should be taboo. If there's corruption going on next door, there's corruption going on 3,000 miles away or 10 million miles away. It's important that we expose it, because if we don't bring forth the evidence to show what is happening and who's doing it, then we can't stop it. We can't change it. We can't even make a decision whether or not we want it. We just fall into these, pre-allocated little boxes of different shades of blue and different shades of red. And
Right.
whether you believe that you are or not, you know, there are certain tells that you might give away that you still believe in that left-right paradigm. And it's hard to get rid of because they spent so many years putting that propaganda into our heads that we can't help but think that way. It's a conscious decision to, as soon as that thought pops in our head, say, wait a minute, that's ridiculous. That's left, right. That's blue team, red team. I'm not even going to entertain that.
Right, and
Um,
along those lines, just to throw something out there, I've taken a little bit of interesting heat recently because apparently I had people that were more latched on to the right wing of things than I thought, that were sort of following some of the stuff I was doing, and of course, I actually say that I believe that that hemp and cannabis, marijuana, all of these products, I think, should be absolutely legal and should not be restricted by the government, or should be anything that's a punishable crime, in a free country, but so free as it may be, allegedly. And the thing is that there's interesting stuff going on in the world of, say, cannabis or hemp too, right?
oh, yes, I've written several articles. The International Cannabidiol Organization of Manufacturers and Research, ICMAR is the acronym. They have been paying for independent lab testing to be done on products that claim to have CBD in them. And I've been writing articles about their lab results because it's amazing to me. The most recent article that I did was
Well,
on.
really, really quickly before you go there, I mean, I'm sure most of my listeners know, but I mean, could we just really quickly explain what you mean by CBD?
CBD is cannabidiol. Cannabidiol is the medicinal, sorry, part of the hemp and marijuana plant. Cannabidiol tells cancer cells to turn off and you expel them naturally. Cannabidiol tells healthy cells that are performing naturally and normally to ignore the abnormal cells, and not just cancer cells, but any cell that is behaving abnormally to shut off. And cannabidiol it works with your immune system, so it helps with your gut. If you have gluten allergies or any problems with your gut, a lot of people who suffer from autism have problems with their gut. Cannabidiol can work for you. If you have seizures, it breaks the blood-brain barrier. It also works on depressive disorders. So throw away those pharmaceuticals and start taking cannabidiol.
Mm, exactly.
Cannabidiol can work a lot of retailers who sell cannabidiol will tell you that they have to put THC in their product in order for it to work. That is not true. Studies have shown that cannabidiol works without THC. The only function of THC is to get you high. And what it does is it alleviates the pain because it turns the receptors off in your brain and you just don't feel it. But there's no medicinal purpose to THC. The cannabidiol itself can not only function on its own without THC, but it is the medicinal part. So you need cannabidiol if you're using it for medicine. If you just want to get high, you want high THC content.
Well, but what about for use in control of pain and things like that? You mean to say that the THC is not even necessary?
Oh no, the THC is necessary because that you would want high THC content. And if you go to a dispensary, if you live in a city or a state where it's legal for medicinal or in Colorado or Washington state, the dispensaries have different versions, different hybrids where they're high THC, moderate THC, high CBD, low CBD, moderate CBD, based on what your need is. If you have epileptic disorders or seizures, then you want to have high CBD, low THC, or no THC at all. Erythritol sells no THC, high CBD content in a lozenge, so you just suck on it and you go about your day. And that is enough CBD if you take 2 or 3 a day, depending on your needs, what you need it for. I use it because I noticed last year during winter that my knees were not working as well as they should have. And after playing on the floor with 2 kids, I kind of understand. So I live in a house that has stairs, and so I have to deal with the stairs. But since taking erythritol, I don't even feel it. I don't notice it. And living in Washington State, it's a good thing because it rains 9 months out of the year, and that affects arthritis. So again, if you have inflammatory problems, or if you have arthritis or early arthritis, or even blown out rheumatoid arthritis, my mother has arthritis in almost every joint in her body. She would benefit greatly from erythritol and CBD.
Right. I
So
mean,
when
it's great with inflammatory diseases of all kinds, not just in the bones, but the inflammations, like you said, in the digestive tract and things like this. It actually helps with that as well.
It's very important. The federal government has been studying it since 1940, and they patented it in 2003. So they were studying it from 1940 to 2003 and finally decided to patent it. That's a lot of information that they have. And if you go to PubMed or the National Institutes of Health website, which is PubMed, you can see thousands and hundreds of thousands of studies. I've got it linked up in articles that I write about CBD and medical marijuana in my article, showing study after study after study, going all the way back to the 1940s where they were first testing this. This is this is not health management. This is getting rid of the problem. So right now you've got Monsanto coming into the dispensaries and working in Colorado with River Rock dispensaries, and you have GMO marijuana showing up in dispensaries across the country, and you have to really be careful about this. And the United Cannabis doesn't seem to have a problem with it because they're working with Monsanto, and they actually have a Monsanto gentleman who's on as an advisor to their board of directors. So you
Nice.
have to have a lot of discernment when it comes to this because this is a new industry. An ex-executive from Microsoft is teaming up with Vincent Fox, the former Mexican president, to market medical marijuana. Philip Morris in 1964 was talking about using marijuana, studying marijuana, seeing how they could create a carton of marijuana cigarettes to be sold at some point in the future because they knew that this was going to come up. And with all of this new industry, there is a bubble being created. And the bubble is that there are a lot of people joining into this industry and putting out products all of a sudden, and they all look awesome, and nobody really knows much about CBD or medical marijuana or marijuana in general. And so we're just purchasing products because the marketing looks good. And the problem with that is there are a lot of companies, especially when it comes to CBD, especially when it comes to people who are using the product for medicinal purposes, where they are being hornswoggled and bamboozled by snake oil salesmen. Literally, there is a company called Flammeret, and Flammeret is a company that creates flame retardant. Okay, so they are a chemical company that creates flame retardant, and they decided that they want to go into the CBD industry. So they have created Royal Hemp, which is a 30 milliliter liquid dropper, and it is sold for about $40. Now, when
Okay.
ICOMAR had this tested, and they tested the product purchased from the Royal Hemp website directly from the manufacturer, they tested this 6 times because they couldn't believe what they found. Are you ready?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I want to know about this, and I also want to just hear briefly where it is that you got this from. But go ahead and tell everybody what it is they found.
There is zero CBD in this product. They claim 200 milligrams of CBD in each 30 milliliter bottle. There is zero. There are trace amounts of THC, 0.0300 per bottle, per 30 milliliter bottle. Trace amounts of THC. There is absolutely no CBD in this product, period. What are you spending $40 on?
Well, that's interesting because if you have a trace amount that's that low to begin with, you could almost do that accidentally, to begin with. But what are you spending your money on? This is a good question. I mean, what does the label say about this, though?
The label says 200 milligrams of CBD. That is just not true. They tested it 6 times. I spoke with the gentleman who had the test done at ICOMAR, and they tested it 6 times because they couldn't believe that it contained no CBD at all. To me, and these ICOMAR pays for the tests independently. They don't have any donation drives or anything. They pay for the testing because we have an industry, like I said, a bubble being created where all these people are pushing these products. We have the biggest in the industry, which is Hemp Meds PX and Canaway. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this on your show, but Dixie Botanicals, Canaway, and Hemp Meds PX are all tied into this larger corporation called Medical Marijuana Incorporated. Now, a former head of the science for hemp oil supplement for the corporation of Dixie Botanicals, she quit her job. She was the one who created the product that Dixie Botanicals is using. She quit her job and made a public statement. And these are her words. Anyone using CBD from hemp product, please be aware that you're not getting what you think. These formulations start with a crude, dirty paste contaminated with microbial life. I've seen this and the organisms decomposing in the paste. Then the paste perhaps even contains residual solvent and other toxins as the extraction is done in China. And this process actually renders the product unfit for human consumption. This is a woman who had a very good job at Dixie Botanicals, one of the largest distributors of medical hemp marijuana, hemp oil, you name it, they are huge, along with Hemp Meds PX and Canaway. And she's saying that the base that they use, the CBD hemp oil paste, is unfit for human consumption.
That's a hell of a statement, really, because this is somebody who was involved in this, would obviously have an understanding of what's being developed. And I've said for years that, and people don't realize a lot of the pharmaceuticals and things that they get from all walks, let's just say, of the pharmaceutical rainbow. A lot of them come from China, and the standards used to create a lot of those things are not are not what you might think they are. Regarding the concentration of different elements of acceptable levels of toxic things, acceptable levels, and even weirder in there is the concept of microbial life. Things beginning to decompose in the paste. I mean, this just sounds sickening, really.
It is because we don't know much about this, and there's such an influx. And the alternative media has picked up on it, and you've got lots of people, lots of big names selling products right now. And the problem is, some of these products do not contain what they say they do. In fact, Dixie X Dew Drops contains only 45 milligrams when they claim over 100 milligrams, and they cost $40 a bottle.
Well, it's a lot
They
better than the
also
other product that has nothing in it, but
and this other product that has absolutely nothing in it. This is from Flamerex. This is Royal Hemp, the 30 milliliter, 200 milligram bottle. Do not buy that. It is complete snake oil. Do not buy that product. They are also coming out with new products. They have a skin cream that is supposedly infused with cannabidiol, just like their droppers, right? And they also are going to be using their flame retardant on to create flame resistant hemp cloth. And so they've got these two products coming out by the end of the year. The skin cream is coming out within the next 3 or 4 days. Do not buy this. Do not buy any more of their products. Seriously, you're wasting your money. And the problem with the snake oil salesman is this is a new concept to people. Even though a lot of people have known about cannabidiol for many, many generations, it's new to us now. And when people try something new, and this is just psychology, folks, you try something new, you buy a bottle, you think it has 200 milligrams, it actually has 1.3 milligrams or maybe even no milligrams at all. And you try the product and maybe even buy it a second time to keep trying it. And you say, you know what, this doesn't work for me. And so you put it down and you go back to the pharmaceutical answer. The thing about cannabidiol is there is no, it doesn't work for me. Our physiological makeup begs that we have cannabidiol in our system. We have receptors in our brain. We also have receptors on our organs in 7 places in our body. So we need to take in cannabidiol. Our bodies are built for it, no matter who you are. There is no, it doesn't work for me. Yes, it works for you. The problem is you bought a product from a snake oil salesman. And because this industry is new and there aren't a lot of people like me talking about the chicanery going on with these fake products, you don't know that the product you bought doesn't have 200 milligrams, and so you're taking less. So it takes you longer to get to the result. And who wants to wait? We come from a microwave mentality. We can't have it in 30 seconds or less. We don't want it, so we put it down.
right.
And when that shift starts to happen, the cannabidiol industry is going to fail. That's when the bubble's going to burst. And the factual healing properties of cannabidiol will be swept right under the rug, under history's rug, under the medical industry's rug, and we will never speak about it again until maybe 200 years later when somebody discovers, oh, there's cannabidiol in the hemp plant. We go through this process all over again.
Well, right. So it does beg like it's being done by design. It's almost like begging for that answer because, after all, if you can sort of dissuade people from, and I say this a lot about certain things that come up in the information stream, that that there are some people out there that are meant to distract and things like that, that are meant to mislead people in order to in order to say, listen, don't listen to the alternative media because this person came from there. Come back over to the mainstream garbage because we're going to tell you a little more about some NFL, wife beating situations and things like that, which all of a sudden seem to crop up all in one nice clump. That's always a good thing to do, and let's keep watching our celebrities and who got married recently to somebody else for 2 days and all that kind of fun stuff, because that's the real news. Those kooks over there, they don't know what they're talking about because they're talking about nonsense. This is exactly what I see in a lot of cases too. So it is strange, and you're right. With this new industry, it's frightening, but I guess greed knows no bounds. I mean, I don't even know what other sort of reason there could be for somebody to want to do this, to put stuff out. But then again, labeling is one of those things that seems to slip by people that they don't really care about. They don't usually read labels, the general populace anyway. They don't usually read labels. They don't really pay attention. It looks like food, so it must be food. It doesn't matter. And let me just back up on one thing, though. a flame retardant hemp clothing. Is that what you said?
Yes, Flammeret is going to introduce a flame-resistant hemp cloth that they will be able to build anything that you build out of cloth. Clothing, tarps, and anything that you would build. I realize tarps are plastic, but um, the circus tent, anything that you would build out of cloth, you could have it flame resistant. However, I need to remind people that there was a study that came out 2 years ago that very explicitly explained the correlation between flame retardant used on baby clothing and SIDS.
Right. Right, and this is something that's come up a lot of times. I mean, everything that seems to be flame retardant, in one way or another, is apparently poisonous. It just keeps happening. There's not too much good natural flame retardant out there that's not in some way harmful to somebody. It seems like, and wow. I mean, that just seems like the strangest sort of Frankenstein combination to make hemp that's not meant to burn. You know?
Yeah, right. They will soak it in and you'll be able to spray it on. It doesn't stain, it's odorless according to them. It's biodegradable according to them. Oh, sure.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
biodegradable, but you can't light it on fire. That's also very weird.
Because that's totally natural.
Yeah, well, that makes sense in nature, doesn't it? I mean, there's plenty of things that you can't. I
I
couldn't
know.
finish that sentence. I literally dropped my head in the middle of that sentence. I just had to stop. Oh,
The fact that they even use these tactics means that it works on a portion of the population, which means that we have a problem using logic and discernment. We just don't have the intellectual capacity as a whole. There are exceptions to the rule, but as a whole, we just are not able to utilize the frontal lobe enough to be able to say that's absolute malarkey. I can't even believe you said that.
yeah,
That's ridiculous.
I don't know. I guess I'm kind of dumbfounded by it, but it just seems that I don't know. Like I've said many times, also, critical thought is just one of those lost arts at this point. It just doesn't seem to exist among the majority of the population, uh, and it's sad because, again, the discussions, and people make allusions to this all the time about the cannabinoid system in the body, and the receptors, and all these things which you had just brought up. Um, Absolutely valid, useful, good stuff, which is now, again, being infiltrated by I don't know what, whether it's, like I say, if it's for greedy purposes or if it's for for the effort of dissuading people from actually attempting to explore these things as alternatives to the larger pharmaceutical industrial complexes.
Well, what I'm seeing
Poisons.
right now is a bubble being created. I see a lot of right-wing and alternative broadcasters and websites pushing HempMeds PX and Canaway and Dixie Botanicals and Ultra CBD, which is another snake oil. They have a fraction. They claim again 200 milligrams. It's 42.6 or 42.9 milligrams. It's a fraction. Again, you're going to take it and think it doesn't work for me because you're not getting 200 milligrams. You're getting 46 or 42. So we have this push toward purchasing these products because they know that in order to create the products the way that they are being marketed, it would cost more, they would have more of this or that and the other, and the end result being that people would be able to take care of themselves, not just going to a holistic doctor, not just using natural medicine, but actually using something that you could take throughout your whole life. You can't OD on it. You can't disrupt any part of your body because of it. You can take as much of it as you want. There's no adverse side effects ever recorded, ever, ever, ever. Nobody's OD'd on it, ever, ever, ever. And this would be a disaster to the pharmaceutical and the medical community at large, including the psychiatric community, because people would start taking cannabidiol when they feel depressed.
Well, especially the psychiatric community. I mean, for God's sake, If there was something out there that, wasn't petroleum based, didn't completely disrupt the whole rest of your brain that could possibly, sort of ease the effects of certain things or, make the transition between natural hormonal changes a little more palatable, let's just say, to the human condition. I mean, wow, if you could administer that yourself without a prescription or, from one of these, God complex people that call themselves doctors at this point, wouldn't that be, entirely counterintuitive to what's going on?
And they're using this marketing ploy that we all fall for because every time we see a doctor, what do we think of? Lab coat and stethoscope around their neck, right? Well,
No.
now you have Doctors Trusted, which is an organization of, and I'm quoting from their website, folks. And when you get this, raise your hand. I won't see you, but I'll know that you're there. On their website, they describe themselves as a consumer protection organization that, quote, consists of seasoned entrepreneurs, qualified doctors, and experienced marketers. Raising your hand yet?
Oh.
Working together to make the internet safer for consumers buying health and fitness products. What? This is a coalition made in hell. And they are using the idea, the authoritative idea of the mythology, the authoritative mythology of a doctor to market to you. And who uses Doctors Trusted? And by the way, it's just one doctor from Doctors Trusted that a lot of these hemp oil, snake oil salesmen use. His name is Dr. Daniel Hanley. Dr. Daniel Hanley, uh, Doctors Trusted claims that Dr. Hanley has no financial interest in Ultra CBD, which uses his endorsement, as well as Hemp Meds PX and Rosho, RSHO, and Citadex, and Canchu, which is Canaway, and many others. But Dr. Hanley, he sells his endorsements anywhere from $100 to $6,875 is the highest he's been paid that I've found. Okay, so if you've got some money in your pocket and you've got a cannabidiol organization and you need a doctor to write you a good write-up, you can buy Dr. Hanley from Doctors Trusted from anywhere between $100 and $6,800. And you can get the audience, the viewers, the people who come to your website to believe that you have a good product based on a little picture of a doctor with a lab coat and a stethoscope around his neck. And the best part about this is Doctors Trusted only evaluates the website content, not the product. They evaluate the website content for consumer protection based on rules and regulations set forth by the FDA. So you can and cannot make these claims. That's it. Doctors Trusted states that they do not test the products for efficiency or potency. So you think that you're getting a review on the product, and it's really a review on the verbiage of the website. But because he's a doctor with a lab coat and a stethoscope, you think that you're buying a good product and you're buying snake oil crap.
And it sounds like the logical evolution for what we see, every single day when you have these drug reps coming into the local doctor's offices. It's just gotten a lot more efficient, hasn't it?
Yes.
And, meanwhile, it's just about the marketing. It's not about the effectiveness of the medicine necessarily. It's not about what the purpose of it is or the so-called side effects. And, you can't see me hold up the air quotes, but I do it every time I say side effects because they are effects of the medicine. Okay, and notice how every time, you see somebody that ends up on a pill and they get it up to a therapeutic level, they realize that they need another pill to counteract the side effects of the first pill and so on and so on, and it becomes an aggregate effect. Meanwhile, all you've really done is market a bunch of crap to somebody who had one problem to start with. And, God help them all if we had, something that was legitimately able to be administered by ourselves that would balance out our systems and make things work better. I mean, gee, it would put them out of business, maybe.
Absolutely. So you've got this CBD industry cropping up. You've got all of these people, big names and small names. They're being sold all over the place, including independent and alternative media. And as ICOMAR puts out these independent studies, I'm reporting on them because this is part of my job. This industry is cropping up because it's a bubble and it'll burst. and they want to make as much money out of it as possible. And meanwhile, you're buying snake oil and you think that you're helping yourself and you're not. And you wonder why you keep getting sicker and sicker and you say it doesn't work and you go back to the pharmaceuticals. The pharmaceuticals win in the end anyway. Let's not let that happen. Let's only support companies that test out exactly what they claim on their websites for CBD content and only buy from those companies. And if we put those other companies out of business before they're ready, it will be a clear message that we don't want to play around with this. We understand that it's serious and it could really help us. And we don't have to die of cancer. And we don't have to die of all these ailments. We can take care of ourselves. We don't have to be in pain because of arthritis. We can live a fairly decent life and never feel the effects of arthritis at all. We can take care of our immune system so that we don't succumb and we don't have to vaccinate ourselves anymore. A little bit of CBD every single day for the rest of your life will help you stay healthy.
And not only that, but I mean the digestive system. There are plenty of people out there with all sorts of problems, from ulcers to Crohn's disease, that could be helped through this as well. And this is all extremely valuable. Now, we only have a couple of minutes left, Suzanne. I'm just warning you because at some point my bumper will automatically kick in, and that'll be the end of this. So if there's any last things you want to get in, by all means, go right ahead.
Well, I know that we wanted to talk about Eric Holder, and I'll just briefly mention I made a little funny meme today about Eric Holder, sort of looked like he was kind of praying, saying, "I hope that now that I'm resigning, they don't call me back or to answer for any of the scandals that I created." And I find it very interesting that the gentleman, border agent Terry, who was shot, Brian Terry, his sister came out today in Town Hall, townhall.com, and told them that it's interesting that Eric Holder is leaving because there is about to be an exorbitant amount of release from FOIA documents of several thousands of documents concerning Fast and Furious. And a report out of NPR that I found interesting, when Obama and Eric Holder were speaking over Labor Day weekend, which is when they made this decision about the resignation. Since then, Eric Holder has made it clear that he adamantly wants to leave as quickly as possible. So I think that he's trying to do that same thing that Hillary Clinton did when she resigned. I was shocked because I never thought that she would ever quit any job. She's
Right.
only been fired from jobs. She's never quit that I know of.
Yeah,
Like
this is
Watergate.
true. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
People do forget Hillary's connection to the Watergate Committee and all that kind of fun stuff. And let's not forget Eric Holder's connection to the whole Michael Vick thing. Let's not forget, Eric Holder's connection to a lot of stuff. I mean, you can, if you search around a bit, you can find that this guy was, actually the interim attorney general during the first part of the W administration, before we got our good friend in there, of course, and and all that. I mean,
He
this
was
guy.
running the show and lost some of the explosives that ended up in the Murrow building.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Another fun piece of information. Yeah, keep digging, people. Look it up for yourselves. Interesting that this guy is resigning, air quotes again, at this time. And absolutely a good point that she makes about that, because those FOIA documents are just about due to hit, I think, at the beginning of the year, right?
absolutely. And I thought, well, him being adamant that he wants to leave as quickly as possible, as soon as they name a successor, he's out of there. And he doesn't want it to extend any longer than the beginning of 2015. Because, like you said, once these documents come out and the researchers who have been continually researching since this first broke will have a massive amount of information to then go after him. And I hope that he's held accountable for his crimes, even post employment, because as an employee capacity, he made certain decisions that resulted in not only the death of the border agent Terry, but also hundreds of Mexicans, or several hundreds of Mexicans, at the hands of the drug cartels.
This is correct, and something that we should not forget as well. because absolutely corruption is one of those things that needs to have the light of day shined upon it. Otherwise, we will never put a stop to it. And again, Suzanne, thank you for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. I advise everybody who's listening to us to go to occupycorporatism.com and also the usindependent.com. And if you use social media, you can definitely find links and photos and memes and things from Suzanne. They're out there all over the place. And it's just really good to have 2 hours with you. It seems as though it flies right by when I have you on, though, Suzanne, because we get into talking about something else a little off topic, and the next thing you know is we're all done. So it's just about there. But thanks again, and like I said, if there's any last.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
See, but I have the files. I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, pistols and fondle slab of choice. I don't know what computers doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not Jesse Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It's hard to get real information because seriously,